If you want to be the best in the mid-range segment, where you always have to save a little both for the sake of the budget and to differentiate yourself from the higher-end models, you have to be smart about where, what, and how to subtract and add so that you can offer users a well-rounded product that can satisfy their needs in all respects. Samsung has so far proved to be one of the best at this, with its Galaxy A50 series with a focus on dual models. Let's see what our impressions are after the test and whether this phone has managed to eliminate the impression of vagueness that we've seen on the odd model in this series so far. When the Galaxy A54 was released last year, it was slightly more expensive than the competition, so it was only after a few months, when the price dropped to around €350, that it became price competitive with other mid-range models, while we have a similar situation where the price at authorized retailers for the basic A55 model starts at around €450, and knowing the price trends of the Galaxy A series, in about a month's time the price will surely start to drop. If that's still too much for you, there's also a cheaper Galaxy A35 with slightly fewer options than the A55, which we'll hopefully be reviewing soon. This year, Samsung has decided that the A series should follow the S series in terms of design, so the Galaxy A55 looks irresistibly like the S24 models, with the exception of the Ultra. Flat, sleek brushed aluminium edges and Gorilla Glass Victus Plus on the front and back bring the premium feel of a premium phone to the mid-range, something no competitor has done before. We've got a tried and tested design on the back, a glass back with each of the camera lenses coming out of the body of the phone separately, and in this awesome navy dark color, the phone looks somehow the most serious, and it's good that you have some more cheerful colors on offer, so choose according to your mood. The Galaxy A55 is a little heavier than the A54, around 10 grams, but the weight is well distributed so you probably won't notice it, and Samsung has already accustomed us to having an IP67 water and dust resistance certificate in this class, so you can submerge this phone at a depth of 1 meter for up to half an hour. When I first saw the phone, my comment was, "This phone has an iPhone design, I like it," and that I like confirms the fact that Apple's design has been bought by the whole world, where almost everyone is starting to offer phones with completely flat edges, which, as I have said many times, I like very much because the phone itself is much more robust and fits better in the hand. And on the Galaxy A55, the premium finish and aluminium edges only enhance this feeling. The layout of the ports and buttons is more or less standard, with the exception of the SIM card tray, which is on the top of the phone, next to the secondary microphone, and the phone has support for either 2 SIMs or 1 SIM and a micro SD card, while there is also support for an eSIM, which will be of particular interest to those who like to travel. At the bottom of the phone, we find the USB-C port for charging, 2 microphones and the main speaker, which, like the S24 series, has a single slot instead of the standard holes. The second speaker is the phone's earpiece, and the quality of the sound reproduction is very good. I can honestly say that, in terms of volume and sound quality, it is well ahead of the other mid-range models we have tested this year, as all the tones are well balanced, including the lower spectrum, more specifically, the bass. The only deviation from the flat frame we see on the right-hand side is the power and volume keys, which are specially marked, and anyone who has seen this phone with me in the last few days while I have been testing it has noticed and praised this as an excellent ergonomic solution. What we all noticed together were the bezels around the screen, which are much more pronounced than on competing models. And Samsung could work on this for the next generation, because I think this is something that has put off a lot of potential buyers. The phone screen itself is certainly something that should not put you off. Compared to last year's 6.4, it has grown to 6.6 inches, and it is a truly superb Super AMOLED display with Full HD Plus resolution. And this is simply a segment where Samsung is the master of the job. Picture quality, sharpness, colors, HDR10 Plus support, 120 Hz refresh rate, everything is in place, and this is definitely one of the best screens in its class. As you would expect from an AMOLED screen, there is also an always-on display, although there is no time limit on this, which renders the concept of always-on meaningless. The brightness is specified at 1000 nits, and in practice this screen proved to be much brighter than the mid-range models we tested, especially in direct sunlight, even though most of these phones have a specified brightness of 1800 nits. We don't have a color meter yet, so you'll have to take our word for it. Under the screen, there's a virtual proximity sensor and an optical fingerprint reader, which I'd say is the same as on the A54, so it's not too fast, and if you want to speed up the unlocking process, turn off this animation. In terms of hardware, last year's Exynos 1380 has been upgraded with a new 4nm Exynos 1480 chipset. This is an 8-core processor in a 4+4 formation of Cortex A78 and Cortex A54 cores, with this year's faster cores running at a 350 MHz higher frequency than last year. So on paper, we should have around 20 to 25% more performance. The phone was really fast in all operations, and this chipset will easily satisfy even the most demanding of users. While on the graphics front, Samsung has chosen to collaborate with AMD in the form of the Galaxy A55 graphics chip. I have to admit that this is one of the cooler phonies we have tested, as the heating was hardly noticeable even when we carried out the synthetic tests, where the Galaxy A55 positioned itself exactly as I expected, side by side with the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus, one better, one different, but all in all, very similar. Our sample comes with 8 GB of LPDDR5 RAM, although a 12 GB version is also available, and in terms of data storage, the base model only comes with 128 GB of UFS 3.1 memory. And here the Galaxy A55 lags behind the competition, as almost all of its competitors range from 256 to 512. And in the Galaxy A55's strongest version, you have 256 GB available, and I think that's why there's support for expanding with a micro SD card. The phone's battery has a capacity of 5000 mAh, and given that the aforementioned Exynos 1480 is a bit more efficient than its predecessor, I was expecting a bit more autonomy, but during the battery test, it turned out to be quite similar to last year. So if you are a demanding user, expect up to a day and a half of autonomy. What Samsung complained about last year, apart from the fact that the phone comes without a charger in the box, which we are slowly getting used to, is the very slow charging of 25 watts. I would remind you that the Redmi Note 13 we tested, which cost €180, has a fast 33 watts charge, and the Galaxy A55 can go from 0 to 100 in just over an hour with an adequate charger. In terms of software, we have Android 14, overlaid with Samsung's OneUI 6.1, which has arguably been the best UI in the Android world for years, and that's about it. Everything is in its place, nothing sticks out, and at every moment of use it seems as if Samsung has paid particular attention to every detail so that the user is as comfortable as possible with the ability to adapt to himself. I repeat for the umpteenth time that once you get used to Samsung's interface in combination with Samsung's screen, you will find it hard to get used to anything else. And as for the cameras, on paper it seems that Samsung has decided not to make any changes compared to last year. So although the camera system comes with identical specifications to the Galaxy A54, I managed to dig up the information that the main camera comes with a new 50 megapixel Sony IMX906 sensor, but take this information with a grain of salt, while the rest of the cameras in the system consist of a 13 megapixels wide angle and a 5 megapixels macro sensor. The main camera produces really good photos in daylight conditions, with plenty of detail and no noticeable software sharpening, while the colors and contrast are at the exceptional level to which we have become accustomed with Samsung's excellent color science. The dynamic range is not at a very high level in some situations, where in the darker parts of the photo, especially in the corners, you could notice the lack of detail and the presence of noise, which, at least to me, seems to be a consequence of software processing in the desire to sharpen the darker part of the frame. But in most cases, the main camera performs really well, and I believe it will fully meet the requirements of the average user. With a resolution of 50 megapixels, in standard mode, the photos come in at 12 megapixels thanks to pixel binning. While if you want, you can take photos at 50 megapixels where you get a little more detail, and what I like is that the photos in both modes are not visibly different. Thanks to the aperture of f1.8, which also gives you a very nice bokeh effect when you want to separate the subject from the background, the night shots are at a pretty good level. They are generally very detailed, and in terms of colors, contrast and dynamic range, it is the same story as in daylight conditions. The camera's software doses the night mode itself if necessary, and it works quite well, so I wouldn't advise forcing it, as photos in these conditions can often tend towards the cooler end of the spectrum. The wide-angle camera has a resolution of 13 megapixels, an aperture of f2.2, and a very wide angle of up to 123 degrees, and the photos it takes in daylight conditions are very well balanced compared to those taken with the main camera, with slightly less detail, of course. And unlike the competition, you don't have to give up on using this sensor because the photos are more than usable. At night, the photos are much softer than those taken with the main sensor, but they are still decent and usable. Contrary to the already boring 2 megapixels macro sensor that we have seen in the competition, the Galaxy A55 has a more specific macro camera with a resolution of 5 megapixels and an aperture of f2.4. But since there is no autofocus, you will have to make an effort to keep the phone at a good distance from the subject. The camera software also offers the possibility of a 2x zoom option, which performs a crop shot from the main camera, and photos in daytime conditions are at a really decent level. While at night, if you can, avoid this mode, as zoom photos are intended for a higher segment. Video from the main camera is recorded in 4K resolution with up to 30 frames, and the quality itself is at a very good level, with a solid amount of detail. And I must admit that I was particularly surprised by the stabilization, which works in all conditions. At night, we have a little less detail, but the shots are still at an excellent level. The wide-angle camera also shoots 4K video with up to 30 frames per second. And just like the photos taken with the main camera, we have a little less detail, but the stabilization still works very well. And if you want to switch between the main camera and the wide-angle camera while shooting, the transition lasts even half a second. The front camera has a resolution of 32 megapixels and an aperture of 2.2, and during the day it produces very good photos with lots of detail, good contrast, and accurate colors. At night, the photos are a little worse, which is to be expected as there is less light on the sensor, but they are still at a fairly good level. Samsung has got us used to the fact that this camera also records video in 4K resolution, unlike its competitors who still use Full HD. The quality of the video is quite good, we have a solid amount of detail, and the stabilization works well here, although at night the quality drops significantly compared to the daytime results, which is what we expect from a mid-range device. All in all, the Galaxy A55 offers the most complete camera system of what we have seen this year, mainly thanks to the front, wide-angle and macro cameras, but also thanks to the general 4K video recording. As for the competition, some models such as the Poco X6 Pro or the Redmi Note 13 Pro Plus may offer more powerful hardware than the Galaxy A55, but the screen, the sound, the software, the cameras, and above all, the S premium class build quality make the A55 a much more rounded device, and that's what I was talking about at the beginning of this video. Everyone manages to be good at something, but it's very difficult to balance that and be good at almost everything, and Samsung has long shown that it knows what it's doing. The only area where Samsung's A series still lags behind the competition is in 25W charging, but otherwise this phone is a much better experience to use, with the excellent OneUI once again worthy of mention. Last year, Motorola prevented the Galaxy A54 from making a major breakthrough in the market with the Edge 40, so it remains to be seen what they will do this year. Bottom line, if I had to pick a mid-range phone for myself right now, Without a second thought, my choice would be the Samsung Galaxy A55. Write us in the comments if you agree, and if not, what would be your current choice in this class? And in the next period, reviews will follow, something cheaper, but still quite similar to the Galaxy A35, as well as a guide to buying phones in the mid-range. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. The content is very good, and there's a good chance you'll never see it again if you don't. Thank you for your time, and see you in the future.